All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. It is Tuesday, December 11th, 2018, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Wanted to go live earlier today, but I was tied up and I was with my daughter, so didn't have a chance to go live. But I wanted to talk about this story. There were articles written about it going back to February of this year. And then there was an article from December 9th, 2018 from NPR.org, National Public Radio. And then also there's an article from Root.com. But this deals with a slave Bible that was published in 1807 by the Missionary Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves. The Missionary Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves, right? And this is a historical story that deals with how, now this is not an attack on anybody, okay? I may say something that goes outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you don't like what I'm saying or disagree with it does not mean it's not true. Just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. But this is an example of how Christianity was used during the transatlantic slave trade to brainwash enslaved African people and to get them to accept their condition, to get them to accept slavery, and also to really teach them to hate themselves and to separate them from traditional African spiritual systems, which is where our source and where our power comes from. And when you study the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1803, one of the reasons why it was successful is because they reclaimed African spirituality, okay? Vodun. Vodun is not voodoo. Voodoo is what Europeans call it. It's called Vodun, which is a faux word from the faux people of Dahomey, which is modern day Benin. It basically means the spirits. And they reclaimed African spiritual systems, okay? So the NPR.org has an article from December 9th, 2018 from Michelle Martin. Slave Bible from the 1800s omitted key passages that could incite rebellion. Slave Bible from the 1800s omitted key passages that could incite rebellion. All right. And, you know, this deals with being able to control the circumference of people's awareness. Okay, being able to control the circumference of people's awareness. And this is an example of how your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results, okay? So the Missionary Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves was founded in 1794. And this deals with slavery in the British West Indies, okay? The British colonies, the British West Indies. So there is a exhibit taking place, a museum exhibit taking place at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. The Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., okay? And so they have this Bible on display. It's a special exhibit centered around this rare Bible from the 1800s that was used by British missionaries to convert and educate slaves. Their word, educate slaves, I would say miseducate slaves, miseducate African people. Now, what's notable about this Bible is not just its rarity, okay, but also its content, or rather the lack of content. So this Bible excludes, and it's a version of the King James version of the Bible, which was commissioned in 1600 by King James Stuart I of England. It was completed in 1611. All right. And keep in mind, when you research King James was illiterate, people. Just so we understand, King James was illiterate. He could neither read nor write. But a lot of these European kings and queens were illiterate. And when the Africans known as the Moors go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD, 85 to 90% of Europeans were illiterate. Okay, Europe was the dark continent, not Africa. It was the Africans who were taking the light from ancient Kemet, from ancient Africa, from ancient Egypt into Europe to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Okay, so we have to understand this history. And when I teach my online courses like Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, I deal with this history. You can check out our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for more information about that. Okay, so Anthony Schmidt is an associate curator at the museum, and associate curator of Bible and Religion in America at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Okay, and he says the first instance of this abridged version titled, now check out the title of this Bible, Parts of the Holy Bible Selected for the Use of the Negro Slaves in the British West India Islands. Okay, that's the name of this abridged version or propagandized version of the Bible. Okay, parts of the Holy Bible selected for the use of the Negro slaves in the British West India Islands. Okay, and it was published in 1807. It was published by the Missionary Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves. Okay, so, and we talk about the British West Indies, we're talking about, so actually in the article, they cite someone who was talking about referring to what's known as the modern day Caribbean. They're talking about Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, things like this. If we look at Britannica.com, we look at also Wikipedia, just for instance, to get some idea of what we're talking about when we're dealing with the British West Indies. We're talking about Bermuda, we're talking about Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos Islands, British Virgin Islands, etc. Okay, and these were British territories, and they have slavery taking place in these British territories. Now, in 1807, we know that it was Great Britain, and we also know the U.S., they passed laws to outlaw the transatlantic slave trade, meaning to outlaw the importation of enslaved Africans. We know in the U.S., the Congress passes that law in 1807, and it goes into effect January 1st, 1808. So this outlawed the importation of Africans as slaves into the British territories, but it did not outlaw the enslavement of African people, meaning that in these British territories, they can still have Africans as slaves. It was just illegal to bring more in, okay? So slavery in the British territories is going to end officially about 1833, okay? It's going to end officially about 1833, but as En Vogue said, let's say, give it up, turn it loose. Remember, En Vogue had a song, give it up, turn it loose. They didn't want to give it up. So what happened was when they abolished slavery in Britain, Britain paid reparations to 46,000 slave owners, number one. Number two, they forced the formerly enslaved Africans that they had just freed, they forced them to work another 4 years, okay, so they could profit from them. A good article dealing with that is from AtlantaBlackStar.com. AtlantaBlackStar.com. Britain compensated 46,000 slave owners, but would not pay reparations. Britain compensated 46,000 slave owners, but will not pay slavery reparations. Okay. And this is from September 30th, 2015, written by David Love for AtlantaBlackStar.com. And when you study this history, you find out that, and see, I talked about this just to get some background information here. I talked about this back around May 19th, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry. And I did a video, you can watch it on YouTube. And I talked about how Black people watched the royal wedding, but forgot about the British involvement in slavery. Black people sat up here and got teary-eyed and talked about, oh, they're showing love and it was a beautiful wedding. Well, where do you think the wealth came from that was displayed there in where they got married in England? That much of that wealth came from the exploitation of African people. Okay, the wealth that was created from the British involvement enslaving African people and exploiting their labor. So Britain abolished slavery, and it paid reparations to 46,000 British slave owners. And let's see, it provided reparations not to the slaves, but 17 billion pounds in compensation to slave owners in today's terms. 17 billion pounds in today's terms. I'm not sure how much that is in money, but it's a lot more than the slaves got. I'm not sure how much that is in dollars, but it's a lot more than the slaves got. So the compensation of Britain's 46,000 slave owners was the largest bailout in the country's history until the 2009 bank bailout, notes The Guardian, theguardian.com, which is a UK publication. And slave ownership was far more common than has been presumed. Now, the 800,000 emancipated Africans, is about 833,000 Africans who were freed when Britain outlawed slavery in its territories. They didn't receive anything, but they were forced to work 45 hours a week for the next 4 years, so Britain can continue to get free labor out of them. So this is something that a lot of times people don't talk about. Yeah, you abolished the transatlantic slave trade in 1807. Yeah, you freed the enslaved Africans in 1833. But you love them so much that you forced them to work another 4 years, 45 hours a week to extract labor out of them. So when we see the opulence and the wealth displayed there in Britain, just remember where that came from, okay? So this is why Jamaica, this is why you have 14 Caribbean countries who have sued Britain. They're suing to get reparations. Okay, that's something that's talked about in this article. So check out this article here from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Britain compensated 46,000 slave owners, but will not pay slavery reparations. And then there was another article from The Guardian as well. The history of British slave ownership has been buried. Now its scale can be revealed. The history of British slave ownership has been buried. Now its scale can be revealed. Okay, so oftentimes when we talk about, the transatlantic slave trade, we talk about slavery, a lot of times we talk about the United States, and we should. Okay, we need to understand that history, understand it chronologically, but we also have to deal with we also have to understand the British involvement and understand that, these were British colonies, these 13 colonies that started out, that are going to become known as the United States. These were British colonies, but Britain was already into the transatlantic slave trade when Jamestown, Virginia was founded in 1607. Okay, so let's continue. So Anthony Schmidt, who's the associated curator of Bible and religion in America at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., says the first instance of this abridged version was published in 1807. And once again, it's called Parts of the Holy Bible Selected for the Use of the Negro Slave in the British West India Islands, okay? And let me post this here also very quickly here. If you like this type of information, be sure to follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. You can donate to the African History Network if you like to help support us. PayPal.me, paypal.me/the AHN show, or go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can donate there through PayPal. And also we'll post the information here dealing with the online courses that I teach. They're all on demand. We have them in the bundle pack right now, 10-course online bundle pack. You can watch them around the world. It's on sale $60, regularly $130. It includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, which is a 14-hour, 7-session online course that I teach. Okay, so if we look at a little bit of the content of this slave Bible that was used to brainwash enslaved African people in British territories, Anthony Schmidt said about 90% of the Old Testament is missing. About 90% of the Old Testament is missing, and 50% of the New Testament is missing. Okay, he said to put it another way, there are 1,189 chapters in a standard Protestant Bible. 1,189 chapters in a standard Protestant Bible. This Bible contains only 232 chapters. Okay, so Anthony Schmidt, who is the associate curator of Bible and religion in America at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., he said that passages that could have prompted a slave rebellion were removed. Passages that could have inspired a slave rebellion, prompted a slave rebellion, were removed from this Bible. So it reminds us of what Dr. Carter G. Woodson said in The Miseducation of the Negro in 1933. He said, when you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. You don't have to tell him, do not stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and stay in it. You don't have to tell him to go to the back door. He will find the back door on his own. And if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit because his education makes it necessary. So when I see in this article, they talk about how this Bible was used to convert and educate the slaves. No, we have to be very clear. It was designed to miseducate them and designed to keep them complacent and docile and obedient with their enslavement and dehumanization. Okay, all right. So let's continue here. How you doing, Vivian, Dwayne, Keelone, Erica? Just a few of the people watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. Now, one of the passages that they made sure this was in this Bible was Galatians chapter 3, verse 28. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus. Okay. Now, I don't know if they told them, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. I don't know if they told these African people that the letter J did not exist until 1630 AD, and the letter J is derived from the letter I. So when you look up the word Jesus in the dictionary and you study the etymology, it takes you back to Yeshua. I don't know if they explained any of this to them. And also, if we want to deal with the history, we have to deal with the retelling of the story of Osar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and Heru being born on December 25th of a virgin birth to Aset, okay? And how the story of Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the Immaculate Conception, the Adoration, the Annunciation, all of that stuff, how that's a retelling of mythology coming out of ancient Africa, going back to Nubia, at least 3300 BC. If you read pages, it's a beat up copy of it, but this is Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. If you look at pages 94 and 95 of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, you definitely need to have this in your library, your University of San Corre, in your home, your library. The Annunciation, the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin Birth, the Adoration, all this comes out of ancient Africa, okay? And he talks about how evidence of this Trinity, the first Holy Trinity of Osar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. I'll show you a picture in just a minute here. Evidence of this Trinity is known to have existed in ancient Nubia, or Ta-Nehesi, as late as 3300 BC, as late as 3300 BC, which means it existed long before then, but as late as 3300 BC, okay, BCE, before the Common Era, or before the Christian era. Carved on the walls of the Temple of Luxor around 1380 BCE are scenes that depict the following: the Annunciation, the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin Birth, the Adoration. All this comes straight out of African spirituality, out of African mythology, that is retold over and over and over again throughout various people's cultures and adapted to various people's cultures. You read Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson. He deals with this thoroughly. You read The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Kersey Graves. This came out around 1875. He deals with this there, but Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson is even a better book, because that's one of our scholars. That's one, he's the ancestor now, but that's one of our elders. That's one of our African-centered scholars. Okay, so let's continue here. Anthony Schmidt goes on to say, quote, "It was intended for use among enslaved Africans in the British West Indies, which is modern day Caribbean, so Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, etc." he says. So now Anthony Schmidt says there are several theories behind the editing and omitting of so much of the Standard Bible. But the main thought stems from the fact that farmers in the West Indies were opposed to missionaries working with the enslaved Africans on their land, okay? And you had the same thing taking place here in the U.S. with slavery in the U.S. going back to like the 1800s. You had two schools of thought. You had one school of thought of the slave owners who said, well, if you teach them Christianity, they're going to want to learn to read, they're going to want to learn to write, they're going to want to be free. And, you know, if they become Christians, we're going to have to respect them as brothers in Christ. We're going to have to respect them as Christians. You had another school of thought that said, well, no, what we'll do is we'll teach them the passages that we want them to know about Christianity, that we want them to know about the Bible, to make them docile, obedient, and subservient, and to teach them to wait for their reward in the hereafter, wait for their reward in heaven. And if they are good slaves and obedient slaves and don't run away, because they were teaching them this to control their minds, to keep them from running away, to keep them from having slave rebellions and rising up and killing the slave masters and things like this. So you had two schools of thought on what should we teach them Christianity, should we not teach them Christianity? And the school of thought that said we're going to teach it to them, but we're going to teach them what we want them to know, and we'll get handpicked. We'll select certain slaves to be the slave ministers or slave preachers, and we'll teach them the passages that we want them to know. And a lot of these slave preachers were illiterate, by the way. A lot of these slave preachers were illiterate, but they just memorized the passages that they were taught to use to control the slaves. Now, one of the slave, we may call him a slave minister, or one of the preachers, because he did not have formal training, but he was literate, he could read and write, and he used the Bible as a weapon to teach his people that they were supposed to be free, was Nat Turner in the Southampton County insurrection of 1831, which was later known as the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831 in Southampton County, Virginia. Because in Virginia, up until 1831, it was legal to teach slaves how to read and write. It was legal in Virginia to teach slaves how to read and write up until the Nat Turner Rebellion. And then when they found that after the rebellion, after they executed Nat Turner November 11th, 1831, he was tried and executed, things like this, right? After they executed him, the state legislature changed the law, because when they found out that Nat Turner was literate and he could read the Bible, and he was using the Bible as a tool to teach his people that they were not supposed to be slaves and to fight back, they said, oh no, we got to change all this. So, it's just like in about 1969, when the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense stormed the state capitol, and they went in with shotguns and 357 Magnums, and they studied the law, and they learned that you can legally open carry in the state of California. And then once that happened, then the lawmakers changed the law, said, oh, no, we can't have this. once the Black Panthers when they learned the law and they were using the law to their advantage, then they said, oh no, we got to change this. And the National Rifle Association supported the state of California, and Ronald Reagan was the governor of California at the time. The National Rifle Association supported the change of the law. When African Americans were arming themselves and using the law, National Rifle Association supported that. History.com has a good article dealing with that, the official website of the History Channel. I talked about that on my radio show about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They have an article about how the NRA was not on the side of the Black Panther Party for self-defense when they were legally arming themselves. Okay, I'll give you the name of this article here. You check out history.com. They have some really good articles there. The official website of the History Channel. The NRA supported gun control when Black Panthers had the weapons. March 22nd, 2018. The NRA, the National Rifle Association, supported gun control when the Panthers had the weapons. Back in the 1960s, even the NRA supported gun control to disarm the group, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Okay, and the 67. Okay, so what year was that? 67, 1967. Yeah, 67. That's when it happened. 1967, because it was before Nixon became president-elect in 1968. That's right. So it was 1967. Okay, we'll post the article here. That's from history.com. Okay. All right. Let's continue here. Okay, so they're using certain passages to control the movements of the slaves, to control the way they think, and to justify the enslavement of African people, to justify the dehumanization, to convert them to Christianity and to miseducate them. Okay, so Anthony Schmidt, who is the associate curator at this exhibit of Bible and Religion in America at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., he says there are several theories behind the editing and omitting of so much of the Standard Bible, but the main thought stems from the fact that farmers in the West Indies were opposed to missionaries working with the enslaved Africans on their land. He said, quote, "This can be seen as an attempt to appease the planters, okay, to appease the planter class, saying, quote, look, we're coming here. We want to help uplift materially these Africans here, but we're not going to be teaching them anything that can incite rebellion, end quote, he said. He went on to say, coming in and being able to educate African slaves would prepare them one day for freedom, but at the time, that's my alarm, but at the same time would not cause them to seek it more aggressively. Coming in and being able to educate African slaves would prepare them one day for freedom, but at the same time would not cause them to seek freedom more aggressively. And when you study Frederick Douglass, right? So we know Frederick Douglass was an enslaved African who ran away, about 27 when he runs away, okay? He didn't know the date of his birth. He didn't know the year he was born. He assumed the birth date of February 14th because slaves didn't have birth certificates. He didn't know. He knew it was either 1817 or 1818 that he was born. And when you read he wrote 3 autobiographies. When you read his first autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And it's important for us really to read the slave narratives to get a firsthand account of what the enslavement of African people was like. He talked about how, now this came out in about 1845. This was his first of 3 autobiographies. But he talked about most of the slaves up until this point that he met did not know their date of birth, did not know when they were born, okay? They would narrow it down to times of the year: cherry planting time, cotton picking time, cotton planting time, harvest time, things like this, time of the years dealing with agriculture. They would narrow it down to times of the year like that, but didn't know exactly when they were born, okay? But Frederick Douglass talked about, he learns to read and write a lot when he is enslaved. And he talked about how, if I remember correctly, his slave master went with, at first, the wife of his slave owner was teaching him to read and write. Then he found out that she was doing this, and he forbade her to teach him to read and write. And he basically said, you know, teaching a slave to read and write basically makes them unfit to be a slave. They will want to be free if they learn how to read and write. Something else, another reason why many slave masters want to make it, in a lot of white people in general, even though you did have white abolitionists, which we should talk about because that did happen. But another reason why a lot of slave owners did not, especially in this country, did not want enslaved Africans to learn to read and write is because when many of us learned to read and write, a lot of us wrote our own freedom papers and ran away because most white people were illiterate. During slavery, you go research this, most white people were illiterate, especially the paddy rollers, the slave patrollers. Most of them were poor, ignorant white people, okay? Most of them were illiterate. So you could give them any piece of paper and say, these are my freedom papers. Most of them couldn't read it. So a lot of enslaved Africans, when they learned to read and write, a lot of them ran away and they wrote their own freedom papers. This is another reason why they didn't want us to learn to read and write either, okay? So when people, I know back in May of 2018, Kanye West made some idiotic comments about slavery seeming like a choice and things like this, and he's proven he really has not studied the history of slavery. The reason why is because there were various ways in which African slaves rebelled, okay? Just having a slave rebellion was not the only one. Poisoning white people's food was one of them. Running away, destroying crops, destroying property, slowing down the pace of work, faking illnesses, maiming oneself, cutting off a part of a foot, cutting off part of a hand, deliberately maiming oneself, learning to read and write. All these were different forms of rebellion that took place. Okay, so we really need to really study African history. And I'll be the first one to say our history did not start in slavery, but most African Americans don't understand the history of slavery. This is why we make stupid ass comments like that. And I know he's back on his meds and he's doing some good things now. And, you know, he's donated money, which is good. I applaud that. I talked about that as well, you know, but we have to study this history. So, so verses that reinforce the institution of slavery, including, quote, the most famous pro-slavery verse that many pro-slavery people would have cited, end quote, was kept in the Bible. What is that? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and singleness of your heart as unto Christ. Basically telling the slaves, obey your masters. Okay? So they made sure they kept that in there. You can't, you know, never going to give it up. You know, they made sure they kept that one in there, the program, the enslaved Africans. Okay, so let's continue here. And we'll come to some of your comments here in just a minute. So this can be seen as an attempt to appease the planter class, saying, look, we're coming here. We want to help uplift materially these Africans here, but we're not going to be teaching them anything that could incite rebellion. Coming in and being able to educate African slaves would prepare them one day for freedom, but at the same time would not cause them to seek it more aggressively, said Anthony Schmidt. Okay, so the article from NPR.org goes on to say, so this version of the Bible is on loan from Fisk University, HBCU in Nashville, Tennessee, and has been in the museum since it opened in November 2017. The university says only 3 copies of this Bible are known to exist, and that the one on display in Washington, D.C. is the only copy in the U.S., thank God. Anthony Schmidt says the museum decided to create the exhibit. Now, the name of the exhibit is called The Slave Bible. Let the story be told. The Slave Bible. Let the story be told. Because of the attention visitors were already giving to this artifact. Okay, and once again, it's at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. He said, quote, from the very beginning, people have been shocked to see it. It's drawn a lot of interest. In fact, of all the items we have on display here, it's probably been the most talked about among our guests. Okay, because see, most African Americans, most of us don't understand our history. And I travel, I do lectures across the country. I'm in documentaries. I've been studying for 26 years. I've been running the African History Network, which I founded in 2010. I have 40 of my lectures on DVD. So like most of our people think that Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution says that we were 3/5 of a human being. That's not what that says. That's known as the 3/5 compromise. But that's not what that says. That deals with the purpose of taxation and apportionment. That deals with how to determine how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives slave-holding states are going to have. So how do you count the enslaved population? Do you count the full? If you have 100,000 slaves in Virginia, in the state of Virginia, do you count 100,000 to determine how many seats in the House of Representatives the state of Virginia can have? And these people that you're counting can't even vote? Do you count half the population? Do you count 3/4 of the population? So between the fight between the North and the South at the Philadelphia Convention in the spring of 1787, they're determining how many seats in the House of Representatives these slaveholding states are going to have. So they decide to count 3/5 of the population. It does not say we were 3/5 of a human being, even though most African Americans think that. Because we don't understand the U.S. Constitution, which was majority of it written by Thomas Jefferson. And even if it did say we were 3/5 of a human being, well, when you actually understand the 14th Amendment of 1868, Section 2 of the 14th Amendment of 1868, 150 years, corrected the count to take the full count of people as opposed to counting 3/5 of a population. So, you know, most African Americans think it was the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863 that freed enslaved Africans. No, it was the 13th Amendment, ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865, 6 months after the Civil War ended, which officially ended June 2nd, 1865. So because we've been stripped of our history and culture, right, and been taught to see reality through the eyes of Europeans, most of us don't understand our history. And that's just talking about slavery. We ain't even talking about civil rights history, Jim Crow segregation, and history prior to the enslavement of African people. Okay, so a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And so this is why when I hear people talk about economic empowerment, I'm all for that. My degree's in business administration with a major in marketing. But when you study other ethnic groups, their foundation is their history and culture, which gives them their VIPs, their values, their interests, and their principles. It influences their economic empowerment and influences their politics. Other ethnic groups are involved in politics. When I hear people say Asians don't vote, I mean, you've done no research on Asians, because you can go to NBCnews.com and look at NBC Asian, which is their Asian platform. NBC has NBC Black, NBC Latin, NBC Asian American, NBC Out. They have these different platforms for different segments of the population. You can go there and read articles about Asian American voters and politicians appealing to Asian American voters, and how in midterm elections, the importance of the Asian American vote. They have articles there dealing with that. So when I hear people talking about Asians don't vote, I'm like, you have done absolutely no research on this. I'm gonna give you a website that'll help you. Write this down. google.com. Because I hear people all the time saying Asians don't vote. I'm like, dude, do you? And I show them articles dealing with this. I'm like, you haven't done any research, okay? But the foundation, as Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, two of my teachers, as they teach us, is African history and culture for us. That gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, our VIPs. So it doesn't matter how much money we have, $1.3 trillion economy, if that foundation is not in place, if we're taught to hate ourselves, if we're running around trying to get blonde hair, if we're trying to use white tenacious from Densea, which came out 2014, skin lightening cream, that's the one that Black China went to Nigeria to promote. Black China, who looks more like white China, goes to Black Africa to promote a skin lightening cream to Black Nigerians. And she goes over there with this long blonde wig or weave, whatever the hell it was she was wearing. This is not an attack on Black China. We're talking about the attack of white supremacy on Africa. This is what happened. At the very same time, Rwanda is stepping up its efforts to fight against skin bleaching creams, because Rwanda has banned 1,342 skin bleaching, skin lightening brands, and they have been prohibited since 2013. Don't take my word for this. Read the article. I talked about this past Sunday on my show, the African History Network show. Read the article from face-to-faceafrica.com dealing with Rwanda's efforts to fight against skin bleaching and skin lightening. As Africa loses fight against skin bleaching, Rwanda deploys police to enforce laws, to curb the harmful effects of the product and to enforce the laws. Rwanda has deployed the Rwanda National Police, RNP, together with Ministry of Health, Rwanda Food and Drug Authority, Rwanda Investigation Bureau, the RIB, and Rwanda Standards Board, RSB, among other agencies, to crack down on 1,342 brands prohibited in Rwanda since 2013. When you go back and look at the video I did dealing with Black China going to Nigeria to promote white tenacious, because that's what the skin lightening cream, which is really used as a skin bleaching cream, but is promoted as a skin lightening cream. That's what it's called, white tenacious, by Densia. And Densia is a Cameroonian and Nigerian singer who used to look beautiful before she started using white tenacious. D-E-N-C-I-A. Google Densia. Look at the before and after picture. She looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost now. Okay, but see, all of this comes out of a self-hatred that is promoted and taught through white supremacy and racism. So we have to understand this, understand how to fight against this. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay. Hey, if you like this type of information, hey, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, the African History Network on Facebook. Turn on the notification as well, so you'll be notified when we go live. Also follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, I-M-H-O-T-E-P on YouTube. Subscribe there, turn on the notification as well. You can register for the online courses I teach. They're all on demand. We have them in the bundle pack. They're 10 in the bundle pack, regularly $130 on sale, $60, and they include ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That's a 14-hour, 7-session online course that I teach, and we deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with the history chronologically. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago, the documented presence as well. And Dr. David Imhotep talks about this in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, okay? And then another book we use in the class, the online course, you don't have to buy any of these books, but we use them for reference. Another book reference is Introduction to African Religion by John M. Beatty. Introduction to African Religion by John M. Beatty, because the African spiritual systems come out of the African culture, the various African cultures, and they influence the psychology of a people. The psychology of a people influences their actions and behaviors. Their actions and behaviors influence the results and what we call historical events. So your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. So you have to understand a people's culture, which influences their psychology, to understand the driving forces, which influences their actions and their historical events. Okay, so, and then also you can visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for all of that, and to register for the online course and more information as well, okay? And then also, because, in October, you had Columbus Day, right? And as I talked about before, Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. When you look at where Columbus goes on his 4 voyages, he goes into Cuba and Jamaica and Puerto Rico, Honduras, Bahamas. He goes into Central America, the Caribbean, South America a little bit. But we have an 8 DVD bundle pack, The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus. The Africans That Were Here Before Columbus, 8 DVD bundle pack. It includes a double lecture I did with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Lectures by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima dealing with They Came Before Columbus, Dr. John Henry Clark, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, and others. So it's an 8 DVD bundle pack. It's on sale $70 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted the link here for that as well, okay? All right, let's continue here. We'll come to some of your comments here in just a minute. And who we have here? We got Warren, Vivian. Vivian said Rwanda forever. So the word Wakanda, I have lectures I do dealing with the film Black Panther. The word Wakanda, even though Wakanda is a fictitious place, Wakanda is not a made-up word. Wakanda comes from the Omaha Ponca Indian language and the Sioux Indian language. And it means possesses secret powers. Okay, the word Wakanda. But Wakanda is also in Africa, it's in African languages. I'm still trying to identify. I know it's a Bantu language. The word Wakanda is related to the word Rwanda and Uganda. It's related to those words. It's a Bantu word. Bantu is a group of 500 languages spoken in Southern Africa, like Zulu is Bantu, Kiswahili is Bantu. Now, the word Kanda, K-A-N-D-A, the word Kanda is a Kikongo word, which is a Bantu language also, which means family. Okay, because I've done a lot of research on this for my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther. So Black Panther, the film Black Panther is deep on multiple levels. Also in the 10-course online bundle pack I was talking about, it includes a lecture I did. It includes an online course I did dealing with the film Black Panther. Because the film Black Panther is deep on multiple levels. And, you know, even though I've been studying history for 26 years, you know, when I saw the movie, and I was reading some articles even before I saw the movie, I was reading some articles about the film. I realized I had to do some like deep research dealing with the film and dealing with the history of the Black Panther comic book before I can do any lectures. So I read over 100 articles dealing with the film Black Panther, dealing with the comic book. Then I bought a book that dealt with the 52-year history of the Black Panther comic book. So I can really understand this, because some of the storylines that we see in the film, the characters, things like this, those all come out of the comic book. When you see, so where they have a ritual combat. So at the opening of the film, beginning of the film, you have T'Challa fighting against M'Baku. Okay, the waterfall where they fight at, that's called Warrior Falls. Warrior Falls, and that's where the ritual combat takes place. That comes straight out of the comic book. When you see Killmonger, who was created in 1973 by Donald McGregor from Marvel Comics, when you see Killmonger throw T'Challa over the waterfall during the ritual combat, that comes straight out of the comic book. That's September 1973. I think it's issue number 6 of Jungle Action comic books. That comes straight out the comic book. So you have to understand the Black Panther comic book and the characters and storylines. And you have to understand African history, culture, language, and spiritual systems to understand the movie. So I had to do like deep research to be able to do the lectures that I do dealing with the film Black Panther. Because this is a deep movie on multiple levels. I mean, when you talk about Bast, B-A-S-T, Bast, the Panther deity, Bast comes from Bastet, which is one of the Neteru, one of the deities coming out of ancient Kemet, depicted by a female deity with a black cat, the head of a black cat in a woman's body. That's Bastet, right? When you look at the main, when you study Wakanda, Wakanda is made up of 18 different tribes. 18 different tribes within Wakanda, just like in most African nations. You have different ethnic groups in the nation, right? And these different tribes have different cultures. So when you study like the main deities in Wakanda, they're Bastet, Thoth, which comes straight out of ancient Kemet. You have Ptah is one of them. When you study these deities, they're like the main deities that are worshipped in Wakanda, they come out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. And then they're collectively known as the Orisha. Well, the Orisha is what the deities were called amongst the Yoruba in the spiritual system of Ifa, coming out of Nigeria, West Africa. That's all in the comic book. But see, a lot of people putting stuff out about the film and commentary and critiques about the film and things like this, and speaking negatively about the film, they haven't done any of this research. They're not telling people this stuff, because you have to have done the research to be able to understand this. that film directly connects African people to African history, culture, language, spiritual systems, all of that right there from that movie. Okay. All right. So also, I forgot to tell you, number one, African-American business owners, hey, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Two, you can advertise with the African History Network on the audio podcast of our show. So we do the African History Network show Sunday nights. You see us broadcast here live from the radio station. And our audio podcasts of the show are on 6 different podcast platforms: iTunes, Castbox, Acast, TuneIn, Blog Talk Radio. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com to find out how to advertise on our audio podcast. You would take your 30-second and 60-second commercial, put it into the audio podcast. Each episode reaches thousands of people across the country. First 2 weeks, you get between about 4,000 to 8,000 listens per episode on Blog Talk Radio. And if you don't have a commercial, we can record one for you at no additional charge. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. African-American business owners, this is a low-cost way for you to reach potential customers. First month is 50% off. Second month is free. Okay, and African-American business owners, post the name of your broadcast here on the thread of, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We got Dwayne Turner. Okay, the Carolina Blue, search the Carolina Blue 17 on Facebook to see our page. What type of page is that, Dwayne? Chaz Bernie said, "Reach one, teach one." Well, we got to do more than reach one, teach one, man. There's 47.4 million African Americans in the country. So we use Facebook and YouTube to reach masses of people. Okay, I understand reach one, teach one, but we got we have to leverage technology to reach the masses. Okay, quickly. All right. Who else we have here? Dale. Oh, Z-Man. Yeah, Z-Man Kids. Z-Man and the Z-Man and the Right Choice Kids. I think that's what it's called. They're one of our advertisers. ZManKids.com. Yeah. Z-Man. So this is cool, man. This is like they have a comic book or something like that for kids. Z-Man, the letter Z, MANKIDS.com. Yeah, Z-Man and the Right Choice Kids. And Z-Man he's a teenager or something like that. And he's a martial artist, African-American teenager. This is good. So we have to support positive things like this for our children. Okay. ZManKids.com. Marquis said, "Love your show." Thanks. And we have the African History Network show, the audio podcast. We're going to upload that tomorrow. We have the video here on Facebook because we're broadcasting on Facebook Live. And when we do the audio podcast, I mean, that hits a whole nother group of people who don't even see it on Facebook. Bast headdress from a Black woman, Dwayne said. Okay, we got LC, appreciate you. I'm not here too often, but when I am, I'm sitting with pen and paper ready to take notes. Okay, I appreciate that, Keith. Warren, we got Warren, also Vivian. Okay, all right, so let's get back to this here. And also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, just so you know, our current promotion, spend $100 or more, get 20% off your entire order. Okay, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Use promo code AHN20 off 2018. And we have that, it's on the homepage of our website also. All right. Okay. So let's continue. For those just joining us, we're talking about there's a exhibit at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. And this is an exhibit dealing with a slave Bible that was used. It was published in 1807 by the Missionary Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves. And it was used to convert African slaves to Christianity in the British West Indies and to miseducate them and to make them docile and obedient and keep them from keep slave rebellions from taking place. Okay. And the name of the The name of the Bible is called Parts of the Holy Bible, selected for the use of the Negro slaves in the British West India Islands. Okay, it was published in 1807. And this is on display, on exhibit at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Okay. All right. Okay, and this is an article from npr.org, and theroot.com has one dealing with this topic also. Okay, so let's continue here. So Anthony Schmidt says the museum, decided to create this exhibit called The Slave Bible, Let the Story Be Told, because of the attention visitors were already giving to this artifact. He said, from the very beginning, people have been shocked to see it. It's drawn a lot of interest. In fact, of all the items we have on display here, it's probably been the most talked about among our guests, okay? Now, while the article goes on to say, while the exhibit tells a story of what's inside the Bible, it also gives people a chance to reflect and respond to the material. Anthony Schmidt said, quote, one of the points of the exhibit is that time and place really shape how people encounter the Bible. What I mean by that is people don't look at the Bible or approach the Bible or read the Bible in a vacuum. They're shaped by their social and economic context. They're also shaped by their understanding of history. And this is part of the problem. Now, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. But what we have to understand is that world history is in world history books, and religious literature is in religious literature. Okay? World history and religious literature are not the same thing. When people don't understand world history, they get confused by it. This is the other thing. And when people read the Bible, unfortunately, number one, most of them don't understand world history. Two, they don't understand the 21 ecumenical councils that took place from 325 AD to about 1870, starting with the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, that helped to shape the way Christianity was taught, what was believed, what was practiced, the books that were left in the Bible, the books that were taken out of the Bible. These are determined at the ecumenical councils. What determines when Easter is celebrated? How do you know? Easter is a movable feast. Okay. So I was teaching an entrepreneurship class at a community college a few years ago, and I asked the class, how many people celebrate Easter? And everybody's hands raised up. It was basically all African Americans. So I asked them, I said, well, Easter is a movable feast. I said, how do you know when to celebrate Easter? Somebody said, well, our pastor tells us. I said, somebody said it's on the calendar. I said, well, how do they know which Sunday to celebrate Easter each year? Because Easter celebrates the resurrection of Yeshua, or Jesus the Christ. Christ coming from Christos, which is Greek, which comes from Ka-rest, which comes from the metal netter, comes from ancient Kemet. Ka-rest, K-A-R-S-T, Ka meaning spirit, rest meaning to rise. This is where the title of Christ comes from, because Christ is not a name, Christ is a title, referring to anointed, okay? Which comes from the Greek Christos. I said, so how do they know? Well, Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday following the first full moon, following the vernal equinox. This is what determines when Easter is celebrated. Easter, Istra, Oistra, Ishtar. Study the etymology of the word Easter. I don't have time to get into it. I've done lectures dealing with this on time to get deep into it right now. But just look up the word Easter in the dictionary and study the etymology of it. And it refers to Istra, Oistra, Ishtar, and it refers to a female deity. But Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday following the first full moon, following the vernal equinox. The vernal equinox marks the first day of spring. It occurs March 20th, March 21st. This all deals with astronomy, but we've been taught not to study astronomy, but African people created astronomy. But when you study the Council of Trent, the Third Council of Trent to be exact, in 1563, coming out of the Third Council of Trent, and the council, and so there were three councils of Trent. The first one's around 1545. The Council of Trent, which were some of these ecumenical councils, they were held to deal with the exodus from the Catholic Church, which was started by the Protestant movement of 1517 and Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., okay, but Martin Luther in 1517. Okay, which starts the Protestant movement, which is the exodus from the separation from the Catholic Church. So to deal with this and some other issues, you have the Councils of Trent. The last Council of Trent of 1563, coming out of that council, one of the results of it was to change when Easter was celebrated. And they introduced a new calendar called the Gregorian calendar, introduced in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII, which is what that calculation is based upon. And that's the calendar we use today. So the Gregorian calendar is based upon how long it takes how long it takes the Earth to rotate around the sun. It takes 65 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and about 46 seconds. Based upon that calculation is how they were determining and how we still determine when Easter is celebrated. Because prior to that, it was based upon the Julian calendar, which was introduced by the Roman astronomer Sosigenes around 46 BC, something like that. And his calculations were off. His calculations were off about 11 minutes a year. Something like that. So by the time the year 1500 rolls around, when they were celebrating Easter, it was off by about 10 days. So one of the things they were deciding at the Council of Trent was to recalculate when to celebrate Easter, so it more coincides with the vernal equinox, which marks the first day of spring, March 20th or March 21st. So they create the new calendar, which is known as the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar we use today. All this deals with history. But what happens when you don't know that you don't know? All this deals with history. All right. So if we look at Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, who was Donald Trump's attorney general pick, we saw that, Washington Post had an article about this. We saw that he used a Bible verse that was often used to justify slavery. He used it to justify the separation of families at the southern border, the Mexican border. But they ain't doing that to white families. They're not doing that to white undocumented immigrants coming through the Canadian border. And the Canadian border goes all across North America, all across the northern U.S. If you look at a map and look at Canadian border, U.S. border, the Canadian border goes all across the U.S. I live in downtown Detroit. I live 4 minutes away from the Canadian border. But that's not the only entrance. It goes all across the U.S. But the way they're treating people of color, Hispanics and Caribbeans and African people, people from the Caribbean, the way they're treating them coming through the southern border, the Mexican border, is different than how they treat people coming through the Canadian border. Sessions cites Bible passage used to defend slavery in defense of separating immigrant families. So the nonsense continues. He used Romans 13. Okay. Let me see here. He said, I would cite, so Attorney General Jeff Sessions used a Bible verse to defend his department's policy of prosecuting everyone who crosses the border from Mexico, suggesting that God supports the government in separating immigrant parents from their children. Now, people had to remind them, well, you remember this Jesus that you talk about you love. Jesus was a refugee also, remember that. Quote, I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes. What happens when immoral people make immoral laws? Is that ordained by God? What happens when immoral people make immoral laws? What happens when unjust, corrupt people make unjust, corrupt laws? Jeff Sessions said during the speech to law enforcement officers in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He went on to say, quote, orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves. Consistent and fair application of the law is in itself a good and moral thing, and that protects the weak and protects the lawful, end quote. Now, government officials occasionally refer to the Bible as a line of argument to take, for instance, the Republicans who have quoted 2 Thessalonians, if a man will not work, he shall not eat, okay, to justify more stringent food stamps requirements, okay. What about thou shalt not covet another man's wife? Oh, we don't want to talk about that one. Okay. What about that one? Okay. But the verse that Jeff Sessions cited, Romans chapter 13, is an unusual choice. Now, John Fea, F-E-A, a professor of American history at Messiah College in Pennsylvania, said, quote, there are two dominant places in American history when Romans 13 is invoked. One is during the American Revolution, when it was invoked by loyalists, those who opposed the American Revolution. So these are the loyalists, because these were British colonies. So these were the ones who were still loyal to King George III, who was the King of England. Okay, and they were loyal to Great Britain as opposed to the revolutionaries, the American revolutionaries, the so-called founding fathers. The other instance, John Fea, professor of American history at Messiah College, said is in the 1840s and 1850s, when Romans, this is during slavery, because this Civil War doesn't start until April 12th, 1861. This is 1840s and 1850s. You have Romans chapter 13 is invoked by defenders of the South or defenders of slavery to ward off abolitionists who believed that slavery was wrong. And there were white abolitionists as well. A lot of times people don't want to admit that, but there were white abolitionists as well who put their lives on the line and said slavery was wrong, and they fought to end slavery in various ways. He said, I mean, this is the same argument that Southern slave holders and the advocates of a Southern way of life made, end quote. Very interesting. Okay, so this is why history is so important. To see, historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the result of a sequence of historical events that lead up to a larger event taking place. And to understand what is, to understand policies, to understand conditions, to understand what is, you have to understand what was. And, you know, Professor Kabahaya Kamene, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman, you see him in the Hidden Colors documentaries. You've heard some of my interviews with him. He's one of my teachers. He talks about how to understand the existence of something, we first must understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, we first must understand the pre-existence of existence, okay? So this is why the history and culture is so important. The people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. All right, so let's continue here. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. And also email us at customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com to find out how to advertise on the audio podcast of our radio show, the African History Network show. Sessions, Sessions, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. He was named after Jefferson Davis, who was a senator from a U.S. senator from Mississippi, who became the president of the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis was one of the biggest traitors this country ever had, because those who seceded from the Union, those 11 states that took up arms against the U.S. government and seceded from the Union and joined the Confederate States of America, starting with South Carolina that seceded from the Union December 20th, 1860. Okay, they were the first state to secede from the Union six weeks after Abraham Lincoln became president-elect on November 6, 1860. And he was the candidate of the Republican Party, which was formed by groups of abolitionists who were fighting to end slavery. And then Jeff Sessions is also named after PGT Beauregard, who was another Confederate hero. They're all on, if you look at Stone Mountain, you Google Stone Mountain, S-T-O-N-E, in Georgia. It's a huge mountain in Georgia, and they have carved on the side of Stone Mountain 3 Confederate heroes: General Robert E. Lee of Virginia, PGT Beauregard, and Jefferson Davis. all of them were slave owners. That's there right now in Georgia. Okay, well, Stacey Abrams was 18,000 votes shy of a runoff election. That's there in Georgia right now, honoring the Confederacy, honoring traitors to the country who took up arms against the U.S. to maintain slavery. All right, so we have Troy, Taylor. Taylor said, yeah, when Obama was in charge, they weren't talking about obey the law. Okay, they spoke of succeeding. Yeah, you had a number of states. Actually, there was, I think they posted online at whitehouse.gov. There was online petitions. You had a record number of states and people, not something officially, not from the state government, but you had a record number of people from various states in this country when President Obama became president, and then when he was reelected, they were talking about seceding from the Union. I say if you want to leave, get the hell out of here. I say you can go. I said that's how you can make America great again. All right. Dwayne said, run down the name of that reading material you showed earlier, and others, please, once you reading material, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. Introduction to African Religion by John M. Beatty. These are all some of the books we use in our online courses also. I use them for reference. And also Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. This is his first autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. We have a recommended reading list of books at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Just click on book list at the top of the page. We have a recommended reading list of books there, okay? And also at our website, we have the information about our online courses I teach. You can sign up for them there. You can watch as soon as you register for the online course. Little packs on sale, $60. And you can watch from all around the world also. It's all on demand. Watch at your own pace. All right. Okay, so as people come from a multitude of backgrounds, Anthony Schmidt says how they encounter the Bible can vary greatly from person to person, and as such, the exhibit will affect them all differently. okay? He said, quote, I hope people take away a greater appreciation for that, and maybe even a self-reflection to be more cognizant of why you read something a certain way, okay? He went on to say, if people can better appreciate that, then maybe they can better empathize with others. If people can better appreciate that, maybe they can better empathize with others. All right, and then theroot.com had an article dealing with this topic also. Slave Bible converted slaves to Christianity by omitting parts that could lead to uprising. Slave Bible converted slaves to Christianity by omitting parts that could lead to uprising. And let me see, there was also an article from BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed had an article from, now I was going back and looking at articles back from February dealing with this slave Bible, okay? February 2018. November 30th, 2018, Dominic Holden had an article from BuzzFeed. A Bible museum backed by white conservatives is suddenly trying hard to attract Black visitors. And they cite Reverend Jesse Jackson here in the article as well. A Bible museum, this is talking about this Bible museum, okay, backed by white conservatives is suddenly trying hard to attract Black visitors. There has been a history of actions that could be, at the least, perceived as favoring a white Protestant audience, the museum's curation director said, okay? So check out this article also from BuzzFeed.com. We'll post the link here to this article as well. All right, I just want to make sure I got all the sources here because I have a number of articles here. I think I got to all of them. All right, and I posted the one dealing with Jeff Sessions. That's from the Washington Post. Okay, so be sure to listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. We also upload the audio podcast of the shows. You can advertise on the audio podcast as well. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com for more information. And we have almost 900 audio podcasts of our shows that you can listen to. Just visit africanhistorynetwork.com and click on the link there, listen to podcasts, and all 900 are there. And then also wherever you get your podcasts from, search for the African History Network, wherever you get your podcasts from as well, okay? All right, and then let's see, we'll get to some more of your comments here before we get out of here. Current promotion, spend $100 or more, get 20% off your entire order at africanhistorynetwork.com. That's going on for a few more days, special promotion here. Let me see. I want to look at some of your comments here. All right, who we have here? Okay, Dina. A friend of mine fought me on this. He believes that the Bible is God's word and was mad at me when I told him things were left out. Yeah, true, things are left out. Okay. One. Two, you have to understand history. World history is what happened, and religious literature is the result of what happened. World history is what happened, and religious literature is the result of what happened, okay? So first of all, a lot of people, and this is something I meant to say, so a lot of Christians who read the Bible, right, don't understand the history of Christianity, number one. Don't understand the ecumenical councils that took place historically. And you can read The Historical Origin of Christianity by Dr. Walter Williams, The Historical Origin of Christianity by Dr. Walter Williams, that deals with the first 9 ecumenical councils. And the most important one was the Council of Ephesus Ephesus, I think is how it's spelled, the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD. Also, majority of Christians, they're reading from a devotional Bible and not a study Bible. They're reading from a devotional Bible and not a study Bible. So the devotional Bible has chapter and verse and is the biblical text. A study Bible is designed to study the biblical text and to better understand and get a deeper knowledge. So my King James version of the Bible is about 480 pages, almost 500 pages. My New King James International Study Bible is 2,000 pages. So a study Bible has etymology of words, word origin. It has explanations of passages. It has a lot more information. Strong's Concordance also has a lot more information to get a better understanding. But one of the biggest problems is that our people don't understand the difference between world history and religious literature. One, two, when we read things in the Bible, and even look up the word Bible, Bible coming from Biblos, which comes from Bublos. Bublos was the Phoenician capital where the early Christians went to go get the papyrus, which was an early form of paper. They go there to get the papyrus to write the Bible in the first place, because the early Christians were practicing Christianity. They were worshiping in the temples of the Amen priest and priestesshood in ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, and on the walls they have all these stories written down. Okay, they're written in the metal net, that the Greeks call the hieroglyphics. So when you actually read books like The Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson, you deal with how many of the stories in the Bible are adaptations and retellings of stories coming out of ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, Mesopotamia, Sumer, things like this, okay? But we don't understand any of this history. So if you look at the word Bible, it's going to take you back to Bublos, B-U-B-L-O-S, or also Biblos, B-Y-B-L-O-S. And this was a Phoenician city where papyrus which was known to produce papyrus. This is where the word Bible comes from. So we have to study the etymology of these various words, Christ, Bible, things like this, to get a better understanding of the history. So most of the people make that argument don't understand history. Okay. Yeah, papyrus leaf. Yeah. Papyrus was an early form of paper. And yeah, so, and then very quickly here, I told you I would show you this here. Also, hey, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. And or go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on the yellow donate button. If you don't have a PayPal account, just go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on the yellow PayPal button, and you can donate there right through PayPal if you don't have a PayPal account. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting as well. So do the sales of our DVD lectures and the online courses, things like that. Okay, and let me show you this quickly, because I said I would show you this. Let me bring up this very quickly, dealing with Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And you see me wearing my Colin Kaepernick shirt. I'm not going to stand for a flag that oppresses Black people. He said, I'm not going to stand for a flag that oppresses Black people and people of color also. That's left out in this quote, just so people understand that. And that's what he was talking about. He was talking about African Americans and people of color. Okay, who else we have here? After that, he said he doesn't want to be my friend anymore, Dina said. Well, see, what a lot of early Christians don't know, they haven't studied early Christian history. Early Christianity looked a lot like traditional African spiritual systems. The way people practice Christianity today is not the way it was historically practiced. But we don't understand that history. You had different sects, S-E-C-T-S. You had different groups, different sects of Christians that were practicing and believing different things. So at the ecumenical councils, what's being decided is the way Christianity is going to be practiced. And you had ideological battles and disputes between African Christians and European Christians. And what the European Christians were pushing is what won out. That's basically what we practice today. Okay, early Christianity, a lot of early Christians believe in what we today would call reincarnation, or some types of some form of reincarnation. A lot of early Christians believed in that, but that's not taught in Christianity today. But if you don't understand history, you don't understand this. Okay, all right. So very quickly here, let's look at this. I told you I'll show you Asar, Aset, and Heru. Yeah, so this is a famous statue. Asar in the middle, Osiris, Heru, his son, on the side, on his right side, his wife Aset, okay, who the Greeks called Isis. And this is where the Black Madonna child comes from. We see she was copied, co-opted by DC Comics with the super heroine of Isis. And these are some slides from the online courses that I teach, especially Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is Aset, the statue of Aset, the virgin, who the Greeks called Isis, with the baby Heru or Horus, born on December 25th, okay, by a virgin birth, born on December 25th. And then from Aset and Heru, we get the Black Madonna child that was worshipped all throughout Europe, by Europeans, by the way. You worship all throughout Europe. But then coming out of the Dark Ages, late 1400s, early 1500s, we have the spread of the transatlantic slave trade. European powers are conquering other people's lands, conquering African nations, extracting the wealth out of them, enslaving the people, setting up plantations, etc. And they're rebuilding Europe, okay? They're rebuilding Europe. And as you have a rise in European powers, you have a rise in European culture, a rise in the European phenotype, and a dominance in the European phenotype. So historically, traditionally, African figures are going to be reinterpreted as European. And so you get the white Mary and Jesus. But when you go look at old images and paintings of Yeshua or Jesus, even in Europe, he was African. And they still have statues of the Black Madonna and Child in Europe today. They have them in Poland, places like that. They just don't. They just don't bring them out when they're shooting documentaries a lot of times. Okay, a lot of the documentaries you see on the History Channel, they may not bring them out then. But yeah, they're still there today. Okay, so these are some of the things, we do with the history of the Moors, the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, and things like this, that bring Europe out of the Dark Ages and taking the teachings from ancient Kemet into Europe. This is how you get the Washington Monument, which is an ancient African symbol coming out of the mythology of Asar, Aset, and Heru. It's a symbol of resurrection after Asar's body was cut up into 14 pieces by his brother Set. His wife Aset collects the pieces, puts them back together, resurrects them from the dead. The one piece that's missing is the phallus, okay? So 13 pieces are recovered, and we know 13 is a number of transformation and resurrection. So this, the Tekken singular, Tekkenu for plural, is a symbol of Asar, a symbol of resurrection. There are about 1,200 Tekkenu all throughout ancient Kemet. There are only about 12 today. And we know that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. We know that Freemasonry, we know that the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon ancient African principles coming out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. The layout of Washington, D.C. is basically a copy of the layout of ancient Egypt. And that goes into Freemasonry. We know the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. We know the term child of light or sons and daughters of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees, which is why when you go to college, a institution of higher learning, you get your credentials in a series of degrees: bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, etc. This is where that comes from. Okay. All right. These are some of the things we deal with in the online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay. All right. So, Cammie Banks said Jesus is the name of the Messiah in the King James Version, 1600. Comes out in 1611. The original King James Version of the Bible, the word was not Jesus, it was Iesus. Go look up the word Jesus. It's going to take you back to Iesus with an I. It's spelled I-E-S-U-S, something like that. Originally, in the Bible, it was Iesus. Okay, prior to which is what it was. English version of it, Iesus. You'll also see that in Latin and in Greek. You also have a spelling I-E-O-S-U-S, one of those, but you also have Iesus, I-E-S-U-S. In the Quran, the prophet's name is Isa with an I, because the letter J didn't exist. Okay, when the Quran was written, the letter J didn't exist. So the letter J is derived from the letter I. The letter J is an I with a hook on the end of it, the hook on the bottom of it. And it's not by accident that in your 26 character alphabet, the letter J comes after the letter I. H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O-P. That's not by accident, because the letter J is derived from the letter I. This is why we have to understand history. Okay. All right. So you can register once again for the online courses. They're all on demand. Watch at your own pace. We have them in a 10-course online bundle pack. And it also includes Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. It includes African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. It includes one I did dealing with the film Black Panther. So that's all on sale, $60, regularly $130 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and we'll post a link here as well. You can watch from all around the world. And we also have digital downloads. We have the Black Panther 8 digital download bundle pack. So you remember I was breaking down some of the information from Black Panther and what the word Wakanda means, etc. So this includes 3 of my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther and 5 other lectures I've done. This is the 8 digital download bundle pack. It's on sale $50, regularly $80. The links, when you can download these, the links expire in 72 hours. Once you download them, it's yours. Watch from around the world. Don't have to worry about shipping any DVDs, anything like that, okay? And that's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted the link here as well. All right. Shalanda said, basically Christianity comes from astrology. Astronomy greatly influences Christianity. Astronomy, it determines when Christmas is celebrated, when Easter is celebrated. It has a big impact on it. The Helios Biblos, the Sun Book, Holy Bible. Holy comes from Helios, H-E-L-I-O-S, the Sun Book. It deals with the travel of the sun throughout the 12 constellations, and it deals with stories that are created, parables, stories, things like this, created based upon the travel of the Son of God, not the S-O-N, but the S-U-N, throughout the 12 constellations. All right. And then also check out the 3-hour lecture I did, Ancient Kemet, the Winter Solstice, and the History of Christmas. That's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, because that goes in deep into the history of Christmas and the pre-Christian celebrations, like the celebration of Saturnalia amongst the Romans, this celebration of Mithra amongst the Persians, okay? The pre-Christian origins of Christmas and how it ties back to ancient Kemet and things like this, and why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th, because nowhere in the biblical text does it state that Jesus the Christ was born on December 25th. There's nowhere in the biblical text. The biblical text does not mention the celebration of Christmas, because the word Christmas comes from Christ's Mass, which means the Mass of Christ. And that word didn't come into existence till mid-11th century AD, around 1050 AD. So we don't understand history. We have to understand this history to be able to understand the byproduct of history. All right. So look, hey, I got to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can order our DVD lectures, our online courses, our digital downloads, read our recommended reading list of books. You can read the articles that are right there, listen to our audio podcast. African American business owners, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, to find out how to advertise with the African History Network as well. Right now, let's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace. And those in Detroit, I'll be speaking at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History the second day of Kwanzaa, December 27th, for Kuji Chagalia, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. The keynote speaker, I'll be speaking there as well. You'll hear more about that, and we'll get the flyer at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at info@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com or customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We can make that happen. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Imhotep. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.